Hi there folks, and welcome to the latest feature on 60 years of the synthesizer with computer music. In this edition, we're going to try and recreate a classic string and pad sound that would have been the kind of thing used in the mid-70s by artists such as Jean-Michel Jarre. In fact, the sound that we're going to create is incredibly reminiscent of the sort of thing he would have used on his albums Oxygen and Equinox. For this tutorial, we're going to be working with UVI's excellent package String Machines 2. This is actually a sample-driven package which works within two of their plugins. You can either use the Workstation plugin, which is freely available, and for our money is nice and clear and concise, or you can use their more advanced Falcon 2 software, which is a fantastically powerful soft synthesizer. Either way, the process is going to be largely the same. And it's also worth pointing out that you could actually start off with a software synthesizer playing some form of bright sawtooth wave to gain very, very similar results. So let's dive in. As UVI have done a lot of the work for us, we're going to start by going to the Patch Browser field at the top of the plugin, double-clicking, and we're going to select the 1970 Eminent K150. This is organised in what they've called a timeline, which as you can see ascends according to data production of each machine. Double click on Eminent K150 and that will load those samples into RAM for us. It's worth explaining what the Eminent K150 was. Back in the 70s, when JMJ recorded his Oxygen album, he had very few synthesizers available. So he made a lot of use of instruments such as Fender Rhodes pianos and also electronic organs, of which the Eminent was one. The one thing that the Eminent had going for it was a really good string patch. Consequently, it's the perfect starting point for creating the kind of sound that we're after today. Once it's loaded into the plugin, you will have a sound like this. Now that's a perfectly usable sound, but we actually want to do our own preparation of effects to understand what's going on. So we have a couple of things to do to turn the applied effects off. First of all, we need to go to the Effects tab, which is at the top of the plugin, and ensure that we're bypassed on all the included effects. Then go back to the Edit tab, which is where the main view is, and if you click on the Effects button on the Edit tab, you'll see that there's also a delay which is in play and a spark verb which is in play. We can turn both of those off, so we now have no effects. Because of the generation of the machines that we're talking about for the creation of these sorts of sounds, they were largely based around single tones. That's to say that we only want to use one oscillator to create our sound. At the moment, you can see from our menu drop down here that we have the Eminent K150 selected with a string sound. You can see that there are lots of other samples available to us, so you can certainly try some of the other classics. In particular, you'll find some wonderful samples from the Selena String Machine series. Because of the nature of the chords that were played on albums such as Oxygen, they had a very slow attack and release time. Consequently, we want to go to the amplitude envelope, and we want to drag the attack fader up to roughly the midway point, and do the exact same thing with the release fader. This means that when we play our chord, it's very slow to change from one chord to the next. Perfect for what we want. Now you'll notice that it sounds a little bit thin at the moment. That's because we aren't using any of the effects at all. What we want to do is load up some effects from within our DAW. So you can see I already have some pre-prepared here. I've got 3 choruses, and what's interesting about these 3 choruses is you'll notice that they're all running at different rates. Obviously the actual look and feel of your plugins might vary from the ones that we're using here, which are in Logic, but the process is exactly the same. There are a couple of things to check. First of all, check that your rates all differ. We've started with a rate of 1.5 Hz at the top. We then have a rate of 0.3 Hz and a rate of 0.7 Hz. These don't have to be exacting, but as long as they differ relatively substantially, you'll get the effect we want. You'll also notice that we have our mix settings set to 50%. That's to say that we are hearing 50% of the dry signal and 50% of the affected signal. Finally, I'm just going to turn these plugins on, and now we can hear what they're doing. And suddenly the texture is immediately thick and it's moving around. Another element we can apply, which is synonymous with these albums, is the phaser. Here again, what the phaser does is thicken up the texture And we've actually made some settings here to duplicate the sort of thing that Jean-Michel Jarre would have used. First of all, we've turned it into a 6-stage phaser, and also right next door we've set the ceiling to roughly 6,500 Hz, and we've set the floor to around about 100 Hz. We've also set our low frequency oscillator to a relatively slow rate of 0.1 Hz. So if I play the sound without, it sounds like this. If I then click it in, it sounds like this. And suddenly we get another level of movement on top of the ones created by the 3 choruses. The final part of the equation relates to either using reverb or delay. You can use either. We're going to use the Reverb plugin, which is free in Logic, and we found a rather nice Synth Hall plugin, which we've made quite generous, and also we've increased the delay to a 5-second delay. We now have an effect like this. So there we go, instant Gasseus strings with a nod towards a couple of classic albums from the 70s. See you next time.